A criminal charge doesn't have to end a person's story, but once they've entered the legal system, they are at risk for making some of the same mistakes that led them down that path. Here in Jackson County, we have a dedicated community justice department that focuses on helping individuals look forward and write a new chapter for themselves, all while keeping our community safe. You may have some preconceived notions, but after this video, you might be surprised about community justice today.
Community justice is based on the principle that no one agency can adequately provide for all of the needs of a justice-involved individual. The criminal justice system has many players, each doing their part, and community justice is that part where all players come together to make sure our community has safety, that the people involved have the opportunity to change, and that we have the best value in providing services for our community, keeping it safe while helping individuals change. For adults in Jackson County, community justice provides supervision, supports, and sanctions when necessary, utilizing evidence-based approaches across the board. By utilizing partnerships within the community, we can enforce conditions of supervision while making sure individuals have the tools they need to succeed. Working collaboratively is one of the things we do best, and it is the unique function of community justice within the criminal justice system.
It's no small feat. That is why we have a team of talented and caring individuals across multiple programs who work in tandem to achieve three main goals. Enhance safety for victims and community by reducing recidivism and the impact of further crimes. Create behavior change for individuals through collaborative coaching, surveillance, and intervention. Provide customer service through fair and individualized justice through teamwork and partnerships. Jackson County Community Justice does this with tried and true methods that have been used across the country and have research that backs up their effectiveness. These are called evidence-based practices, and they inform the specialized training that our probation officers undergo to better serve the specific needs of our clients. What is the goal when conducting a risk assessment?
The risk assessment allows the probation officer to identify the risks and needs of a client so they can work collaboratively with the client on a case plan, which might include a referral to treatment if the client is motivated to engage in those types of services.
So when I started, which was 15 years ago, the risk assessment was mostly static factors, things that had already happened, and that POs couldn't really intervene in any meaningful fashion. For the most part, the risk stayed what it was, no matter how the client did or didn't do except for time. That's changed dramatically. Now we use a risk need assessment that has both static factors, those that measure past behavior is the best predictor of future behavior, and then dynamic things, those things that are current to this time and place for this client, and how that impacts their risk to recidivate, which gives POs a game plan to work with clients to help reduce risk.
What is interactive case planning?
It's a collaborative supervision plan that takes into account client input and where they are, their stage of change, and so we meet them where they're at and get their feedback so they have some ownership in this process.
How is this different from how case planning was previously conducted?
In the past, it was a one-size-fits-all laundry list of things that we expect clients to do or not to do. Instead, this is a process now where they get to give us feedback, and it's a targeted approach. We use the assessments we previously talked about, and we target those areas that are most likely to affect the likelihood of this client committing an offense, and then creating a specific goal for this client, working towards that goal while creating skills and providing positive feedback as they move through this process.
So who goes through the firearms and defensive tactics training?
So at Jackson County, every certified parole and probation officer attends the defensive tactics trainings and the scenario-based training. If they are authorized to carry and choose to carry a firearm, they attend our firearm trainings as well. We also offer a basic defensive tactics for our clerical as well as our front office staff.
So what is the goal of these trainings?
The goal of any survival skills training here for parole and probation is to provide our officers with skills so that when they interact with community members, that they are interacting as safe as possible.
Are probation officers encouraged to use this training as a first line of defense?
So generally, when we talk about first line of defense, we're talking about communication and using our verbals. For example, if we are having a conversation with somebody and they appear to be in a mental health crisis, we're going to work on crisis intervention with them and potentially bring in other resources to help us, other resources being those that are qualified like mental health specialists. Another example is if we're dealing with somebody and they're extremely agitated, we want to use de-escalation techniques, and that's all focused on using our verbals and communication, as well as creating a rapport with them. And if all of that doesn't work, it's our hope that the training that we provide our officers, they're able to come to a conclusion that is safe for everybody.
The goal with every client is to keep them from continuing the cycle that impacts their community, their loved ones, and themselves. We coach them through a process that addresses their underlying behavior that led them to this point. That can look a lot of different ways. One is cognitive behavioral therapy. So what is the goal of cognitive behavioral therapy?
Cognitive behavioral interventions, or CBI, utilizes social learning theory, cognitive theory, and behaviorism. Really, CBI is all about the thought-behavior link and teaching clients that our values, our attitudes, our belief, our thinking, and our feelings all drive our behavior.
So what are some of the methods community justice uses with CBI?
We look at using cost-benefit analysis, behavior change, social skill practices, case plans, behavior change plans, amongst other things. We introduce the skill to the client to give them a better understanding of why we're teaching them the skill, what the skill is going to help with. We then teach them the skill through a basic how-to 1, 2, 3, and then we move to modeling the skill so they get an idea of how the skill should be appropriately used, and then we practice the skill. We practice the skill with them right in our office through utilizing role play, and then we provide feedback. We give them feedback on how the skill worked for them, what worked, what didn't work, and the feedback is collaborative between the PO and the client. And then we give them graduated practice. We give them homework assignments. We allow them to identify the times in the community when they use the skill and report back to how that worked.
So why is a client put into mental health supervision?
If a client has a mental health diagnosis, we want to help bridge the gap between mental health services and the criminal justice system. We want to be able to assist them in addressing any barriers that they may have, and we do that through assisting them with their needs and really using empathy and adapting to their situation that they might be in life. We want to do that through collaboration through community partners, providing wraparound services, and really providing the best resources and services that we can. We want to be able to case plan with clients and develop goals and teach them social skills that will last long beyond the time that they're on supervision.
Can you talk about how mental health supervision has changed over the years?
Mental health supervision has changed through having POs utilize case planning and cognitive behavioral intervention tools and teaching life skills to clients that create lasting change long after they're off supervision.
Some of our clients require more specialized interventions. As we dive into these specific programs, we will be talking about sensitive topics. Though we won't go into detail about any crimes committed, we will be discussing working with those who have a history of sexual and domestic violence and how we hold those individuals accountable. So what is sex offender leveling?
Sex offender leveling is a way to determine the risk that a convicted sex offender poses to the community. And if they're a higher risk individual, we post them on a website so the community can be notified who is a higher risk that lives near them.
What is the goal of sex offender supervision?
The goal of sex offender supervision is to reduce recidivism in our clients so they do not commit future sex offenses.
And how has sex offender supervision changed over the last few years?
The research is showing that when you make it more individualized, you get more buy-in from the client. When it's just one size fits all, they don't feel like the program's appropriate for them. They don't feel like they're connected to the program. So with the more individualized, they get more buy-in. They're getting more impact of the treatment program.
So what is the goal of the domestic violence supervision?
The goal is offender accountability, victim safety, and then promoting lasting change in the client. It's a multifaceted supervision program. It targets specific domestic violence, also known in this world as DV, needs for the clients. We're looking to enhance offender accountability, victim safety, and reduce recidivism.
What types of supervision is offered for domestic violence clients?
We supervise felony domestic violence offenders. We supervise some of the misdemeanor cases. We also supervise a deferred sentence program, which is people that committed DV-related crimes and they're being placed on supervision. If they successfully complete the supervision and the treatment, then they don't get convicted of it. So then they don't have that on their record. We also supervise a prison release caseload. So these are people that went to prison for DV-specific crimes, and then they're being released from prison. We have one PO that does that entire caseload. So there's reach-ins to the person in the prison, and it's setting up release plans so then that person could be as successful as possible upon release from prison.
So what is gender-responsive supervision?
Our system was designed with males in mind. So a lot of these strategies, supervision, sanctions, interventions, treatment, styles was designed for men. So we now refer to that as gender neutral because that's just the majority and that's who we primarily serve. Gender responsive was developed through the use of the WRNA. It's the Women's Risk Need Assessment tool. So we started looking, and I say we, meaning nationally, researchers and practitioners started looking at the way in which women do supervision. Why are women in the criminal justice system? How did they get here? How does their pathway look differently than a male's pathway coming into the system? What the research showed us was that women enter into the criminal justice system in a way that's really different than how men enter in. So we started looking at how do we develop a criminal justice system that works for the women. So taking that into account, looking at the Women's Risk Need Assessment, figuring out what their criminogenic needs are, what are their risks, what are their motivations. How do we then develop treatment, services, sanctions, and supervision that is designed for their pathway and their needs within the system? So it's really looking at equity versus equality. So trying to make sure that what we're doing is effective. So we've adopted the Women's Risk Need Assessment, we've adopted Pathways curriculum, moving on treatment. We've designed an entire unit specifically with women in mind. So how we're treating them is the ways that are the most effective to reduce the recidivism, because treating them the same way we did men, it wasn't effective. We weren't having the same results by treating women with gender neutral strategies. For folks that are non-binary or transgendered, they get to self-identify whatever they need. If they would rather choose the gender neutral, if they would rather choose the gender responsive, they get to make that choice, and we want to support that choice.
How do you determine the effectiveness or the success of a gender responsive program?
So early on, one of the ways that we were able to see that this was being immediately effective was that they stopped absconding. They started reporting and engaging in treatment and services. Now, almost 4 years later, what we've been able to see is a reduction in revocations to prison. We were at the high end at one point of sending people to prison, and we've been able to reduce that drastically. When we started identifying the risks that women have for recidivism, targeting the right needs, and offering the right resources, they stopped absconding, new crimes decreased, and they started reporting and engaging in changing behaviors. So we've reduced the number of prison beds we need to use. We've decreased the number of revocations to post-prison supervision, not even having to send someone to prison, just having to send them to court and involved in the Jackson County court system. We've been able to reduce that. And just getting them to participate in supervision. To be honest, it's reduced violations, it's reduced sanctions. We compared a gender-neutral caseload versus a gender-responsive caseload, and the cost savings just in jail usage, when we started targeting the right needs for women and responding to them as the evidence told us we should, we didn't have to use jail as much. So we were able to drastically decrease the number of jail beds that we were using just here in our local county.
What is the pretrial program at Community Justice?
Our pretrial program starts out by looking at individuals who are lodged at the Jackson County Jail on new alleged crimes. From there, we'll do a risk assessment and taking into account the criminal history and the rest of the community, we'll make a recommendation to the court for a level of release, conditions of that release, and bail recommendation.
So what is the home detention program?
Home detention is a program offered through community justice. It allows people who've been sentenced to serve time in jail. They can come down and apply to serve it from their home.
And are individuals sentenced to home detention?
No, individuals are sentenced to a certain number of days they need to be in custody. After sentencing, they're able to come down and apply for the program at the front window here at Community Justice.
And why would someone typically apply for home detention?
Individuals who have stable employment, children to care for, medical appointments, treatment obligations. It provides an opportunity for those individuals to serve their sentence without disrupting those other factors in their life.
And while a lot of community justice efforts are focused on changing the behaviors of our clients, we also provide support for the people who didn't do anything wrong, the victims.
The basic rights that victims have in Oregon is the right to respect, the right to safety, the right to restitution, and the right to be heard, informed, and present during the criminal justice process. Every district attorney's office in Oregon has a victims assistance program, and the job of those programs is to ensure that victims' rights are upheld throughout the criminal justice process.
How does the DA's office work with community justice to support victims?
The Victims Assistance Program has already had contact with that victim and been working with that person throughout the process of prosecution. When we come to the end of prosecution, then the case goes on to community justice. The community justice parole and probation officers get information about the victim's needs, the victim's contact information, the rights that the victims wish to enforce during the probationary period. All that information comes from the district attorney's office to community justice through a collaborative process so that we can work together really to ensure the victim's safety.
We strive to support every community member in leading a fulfilling life and healing from the trauma of criminal activity and incarceration. But what if we can avoid that trauma altogether? So what is the Livability Team?
The Livability Team is a group of officers that Medford Police Department has put together. They're tasked with providing services and help assisting people in the community that have a lot of calls for service and targeting a lot of their needs around those calls for service to help kind of reduce the future need for the law enforcement realm in them and providing them the services they need to kind of get off the streets or stop having problems within the community that have risen to the calls for service that Medford has received.
Has this been successful in reducing repeat offenders?
We do have a focused group of people that they look at to provide services for, to prevent any kind of future involvement. And these people, once they're removed off the group of people they're looking at, they generally don't come back, and they get more involved in the probationary purpose, and they're not receiving the calls for service on the individuals anymore at the highest level they were maybe. So I would say you can see it, but there's no statistics to back it up currently.
What are the goals of the Greenway Health and Safety Program?
The goal of the Greenway Health and Safety Enforcement program really is to go out, look for individuals that may need resources. We would provide resources with them behind it. We bring out the VA, Access, Jackson County Mental Health, Addiction Services.
And so how would you say this has changed the Greenway and the community around that area?
I would say it's been a really good help in providing services to getting people off the Greenway. They actually have an application now where they can map where different campsites are so they can statistically track how many people are housed along the Greenway and how many different camps may be set up. And they can see the reduction in maybe waste and things that they can actually tangibly see and state.
So what is the FSAP program?
So FSAP stands for Family Sentencing Alternative Pilot Project. It was designed by the legislators about 4 years ago as a prison diversion program for our parents who were looking at a prison sentence but have kiddos in their care. So Jackson County was one of 5 counties dedicated for the FSAP program. So it pays for 20 hours a week of a probation officer to supervise FSAP cases. So it's a pilot project. It's a 10-year pilot project. It gives us the opportunity to gather a lot of research and data from it to really test the effectiveness. It's renewed 2 years at a time. Most of the clients who've come through the program have been moms. We've had more women in the FSAP program statewide than men, just because they're oftentimes parenting their children solely or as part of a unit than some of our males who might qualify. So we've had both. FSAP probation officers spend more time in the home and with the family. You're not just supervising the client that's on probation, but you're sort of part of the family. So you're in the home more, you're working with the kiddos more. The kiddos are learning about the criminal justice system through the probation officer, so it takes away some of that sting and some of that fear about law enforcement, and helping their parents to also just be the best parents that they can be.
How effective has the program been over the last 4 years?
When we look at success, recidivism is what drives a lot of what we do. So that's sort of first and foremost, and it's showing a 10 to 20% decrease in recidivism. On top of that, it's decreasing the amount of time that kiddos are spending in foster care. It's also decreasing the amount of prison bed we're having to use, which has a financial impact as well. Plus, it's keeping families together. So across the board, it's still a really new pilot project. There's only 5 counties, but so far the results that we're seeing from it are really, really promising for our state from both a recidivism and a budgetary standpoint.
Besides having children, are there any other requirements for someone to be eligible to participate in FSAP?
The only clients that can qualify for FSAP have to be looking at as a prison sentence. So these are our clients who have more significant criminal history, or the current charge is more significant. So could be going to prison is probably the first and foremost. Because most of this program is around parenting and around continuing as a parent, they also have to be safe to be around their kids. So there's a lot of types of cases that don't qualify. So if there's assault, if there's any sex offenses, if there's any danger to the children, those don't qualify. They either have to have physical custody of their children at the time of the event or be able to get physical custody of their children back. We also can allow moms in the program who become pregnant during this time frame. So at the time of sentencing, they have not given birth to a child yet, but they may be pregnant and are going to have a child in the future. So we were able to add that in on one of the renews of the FSAP program.
By now, we hope you better understand community justice today. It's about finding long-term solutions to keep our communities safe. We don't want anyone to slip through the cracks. That includes individuals who may struggle with substance abuse or who are facing lesser charges and may be at risk for being overlooked. What is community justice responsible for in regards to DUI supervision?
As a DUI coordinator in community justice, my role is to screen, refer, monitor, and report to the Jackson County Circuit Court compliance and non-compliance of treatment for all cases that have been adjudicated in Jackson County.
And what would you consider a successful completion of a DUI program?
Somebody who has successfully completed a DUI screening with our office, as well as successfully completed a treatment program, and we then report back to the court that they have completed while educating this individual on consequences of DUIs in Oregon, and hopefully educate them enough that they will not recommit DUI-related offenses in the future.
So what is MAT?
It's medication-assisted treatment. It's a group of medications that are specifically used for substance abuse disorders. And most often when we're talking about substance abuse disorder, it's opiate use disorder.
Is there any evidence that says this program works?
Absolutely. There's a lot of evidence that this program works. Overall, these medications provide clients with the best opportunity to be successful in multiple areas in their life. They have better health outcomes. They're less likely to use the emergency room. They're less likely to have significant long-term illnesses that need to be treated. They also have better outcomes in employment and education. They get employed and stay employed. In addition, they use less community resources, child welfare, some of the other welfare programs. In addition, from a supervision standpoint, they spend more time in treatment when they're on these drugs. They have less days of illicit drug use. They also they miss less days. It even includes if just we refer them to a doctor who can prescribe these, and we still see the evidence in the world still shows that there is those reductions in illicit drug use and increase in treatment adherence, even if they don't actually ever get engaged with medication-assisted treatment.
How has community justice's approach to drug use changed over the years?
When I first started, it was incredibly punitive. How we handled drug use was we tried the deterrence theory that frequent UAs, frequent consequences, and sometimes severe consequences, significant amount of days. How that's changed is we look at drug use as a treatment issue. Instead of a criminal issue, we look at how we can help clients get tied into medication-assisted treatment, get tied into traditional treatment, counseling, help them skill build. However, we still have that safety component, so I don't want that to get lost in here. When clients are using drugs and committing offenses or creating problems in the community, we still respond appropriately with in-custody sanctions and those things. But when those things are absent, and we're talking about just self-harm, we look at it as a treatment issue and something that we can work on and have them be successful.
Has Matt been successful in Jackson County?
We actually have tracked quite a bit of stats. So a group of clients who started medication-assisted treatment between February 2008 and November of 2019, we have tracked them. What we saw is 76% of this group didn't reoffend, which when you compare that to the state in general, that's a flip, because these are high-risk offenders. These are those most likely to reoffend. And what also is we had a 60% reduction in the use of custody as whether that be new crimes, arrest for probation violations, and that's for the group at whole. If we take it the group that is still receiving services right now, and they've almost been in a full year, the average, 515 days they used the year days in custody the year before starting medication-assisted treatment, and then from starting medication-assisted treatment until almost a full year, they've used 15 days. So we're talking a 96% reduction in the use of jail beds. That correlates to a significant amount of savings, clients not having to start over, their ties to the community, and especially not having to start medication over.
So what is conditional discharge?
The Oregon revised statutes allow somebody that was charged with possession of controlled substances or a property offense that was motivated by their substance dependence to enter into a conditional discharge.
What are some of the community benefits to the program?
The most significant benefit to a conditional discharge is that upon successful completion of all the requirements, the underlying charge will be dismissed. That's of great benefit to the community because that helps with people obtaining jobs and stable housing and other community resources so that they can have a pro-social life.
So what does misdemeanor drug supervision look like?
Misdemeanor drug supervision requires that a client comply with all the conditions of community supervision and any treatment that is deemed appropriate by the probation officer. Since the client is on supervision for drug charges, oftentimes they may be required to complete alcohol and drug treatment services.
How do you determine success in the misdemeanor drug supervision program?
The first measure of success on any caseload is probably how successful the probation officer was in targeting the criminogenic domains. Ultimately, it's more likely measured by whether or not the probation officer was able to reduce recidivism.
What is ROC?
ROC is Recovery Opportunity Court. It is a drug court referred to in the standard sense for most places. What it is a program to keep people out of prison. So for our ROC court, it's a deferred prison sentence. So in lieu of going to prison, we keep them in the community. We work with them on a weekly basis. We have an entire team which consists of myself. I'm the treatment court judge. I have a treatment court coordinator, the probation officer, a district attorney, a public defender, law enforcement, and then peer mentors, as well as alcohol and addiction counselors. We really have every aspect of the participant in our eyesight to see what they're doing and to get them the services.
What is the community family court?
Community family court is for individuals that have a dependency case with DHS. Sometimes they have criminal charges, sometimes they don't, but in order to qualify, you have to have kids that are in the system. People can voluntarily participate in family court, and what you get with that is really all the wraparound services with weekly meetings. The dependency portion is just enhanced services as far as access to housing that they may not otherwise have. There's a shortage housing statewide, as everyone's aware. And so it's really just coordinating them with all of the different community partners and make sure they get the services, addiction, treatment, cognitive, parenting, ISRIS in the home, and everything. And everyone's at the table.
So how do these types of programs benefit communities in Oregon?
A really cool aspect of treatment courts is the accountability piece, and it gives victims an opportunity to really weigh in on that first decision. Is this person going to get an offer? So as a judge, my position isn't just about getting people rehabilitated, but it's also making sure that the victims of the crimes have a voice and are heard. And so what is healthy for our community is to have an opportunity for them to hopefully mend ways. We're able to do that here, keep families together, make our community safe, get restitution paid back, and then hopefully by the end of our program, where they're required to get independent housing, they're required to work to be a contributing member to society.
And so how do you determine success within these programs?
When you look at success, again, especially looking at something like a ROC court, where everyone has prison over their head, success can definitely differ. If they do recidivate, often it is a lesser crime, not as serious. It's also been shown to lengthen the time between crimes if there is some recidivism going on, as well as often when they go through the program, they do pretty well going through and using the skills they need to better themselves, just given that situation, right? So again, I think the main version of success or not is recidivism. However, I mean, when you look at their families, the community, success can be a different thing. So people get their, son or daughter back. They get, a loved one in their life that they might have not have had before.
So why was the Resource Center developed?
Well, we know historically when clients have been released from a justice system, they're left on their own to sort through hundreds of different resources from their community. So the Resource Center was developed with keeping that in mind. We're a one-stop shop of resources for our clients as a collaboration between community justice personnel and different Jackson County community partners. We work with them one-on-one to address identified client needs and so that they leave feeling a sense of confidence and direction afterwards.
What resources are offered at the Resource Center?
The Resource Center offers employment assistance such as resume building and job readiness skills. We provide assistance with identification, housing referrals and vouchers, food and clothing vouchers, and we provide on-site mental health resources and alcohol and drug services if they're also in need of that.
Can you describe the experience of when a client first enters the Resource Center?
The Resource Center has been designed to provide a warm, friendly, and trauma-informed atmosphere. So when clients enter the Resource Center, we want them to experience that and be greeted by friendly faces, have a safe area for them to speak to us one-on-one about their pathways and what it is that they're needing. And really, most importantly, when they leave, we want them to feel like they are confident in what resources they have been given and that they have some direction for their next steps.
How has the Resource Center been successful over the last year that it's been opened?
Well, in 2019, the Resource Center assisted 3,788 clients, and out of those clients, 80% of them utilized a service in the Resource Center, and we track everything that we assist them with, so we know that we've helped them with mental health, employment, identification, housing, and more. And really how we measure our success is by seeing their success. So when they can get a job and keep a job and get permanent housing, and seeing them acquire a lot of these skills and techniques for success in the community.
Thank you for learning about community justice today and the ways in which we are redefining public safety. We are proud of where we are today and look forward to the next chapter in community justice.